tonight. Alison Smale is the executive editor of the International Herald Tribune. Philip Turl is an editor at RFI. David Clark is deputy bureau chief at AFP, and Celestine Boland is a freelance journalist. All of us discussing the top international news stories of the past 7 days. Now, violence has been on the rise in the Middle East over the last 24 hours. 8 Israelis died and 20 were left wounded when gunmen attacked a bus near the city of Eilat on the border with Egypt. Well, Israel responded. The government said air raids on Gaza killed all 4 militants behind the attack. Palestinians say at least 7 people died, while Israel's defence minister says the violence shows that Egypt has now lost control in the Sinai province, and that is allowing militants from Gaza to attack the Jewish state. That is a charge that Egypt denies. David, is this rise in violence linked to regime change in Egypt?
It could be linked in the sense that the military obviously have more things on their hands than to try and crack down on militancy in the Sinai. But this cross-border attack doesn't strike me as the kind of normal banditry and Islamic extremism that we see in the Sinai. It appears to be quite well planned. The Israelis are alleging that it's connected to a Palestinian radical group based in Gaza, and certainly they seem to have been able to get together quite a lot of weapons, roadside bombs, and Egyptian army uniforms, and then infiltrate beyond a border which had recently been reinforced because there were intelligence reports that such a thing was being planned. So there is 2 elements here. The Sinai is a fairly lawless part of the world to begin with, and obviously the Israeli military have pulled away from it to deal with events in Cairo, although they claim they're launching an offensive there at the moment. There's a broader political problem now, though, because their Israelis, in their response to the attack, killed Egyptian policemen, or appear to have. Now, we have to be very careful about this. In fact, a friend of mine who's in Cairo now, an analyst I trust, has just tweeted that he thinks the most important thing is to get the public information right on this, because both sides were unsure initially what had happened, who they'd killed, and what had gone on. And
in the attack on Thursday.
In the attack on Thursday, there's somebody going. We think probably a Palestinian extremist coming over the border and attacking Israelis. There are Israeli troops going back across the border to chase them into Egypt, and then there's some kind of incident happened there which involves the killing of Egyptian police, who in theory are also trying to crack down on the extremists. And it's very important now that with the democratic foment that we have in Cairo, that we don't end up with a kind of clash between Israel and Egypt, who historically has been
because Israel and Egypt are on the same page with the Sinai province, aren't they? It's in their interest to have security there.
They have the same public discourse on this, and Israel doesn't have the same public discourse on this as any Arab state. But historically, the Egyptian military, whatever the public statements of the regime have been, the Egyptian military has had a cosy relationship with the United States, and hence through them with Israel. So the danger with this, I think, is more political than in terms of terrorism.
And of
these
course,
guys, fire machine guns at tourist buses and civilian cars. They're not a threat to the security of the state of Israel. I mean, after all their planning and sneaking over, they didn't have a very good day of it militarily. But if the response,
they killed 8 people.
Well, yeah, 8 people. It's not what makes states fall. Now they have created a political problem for both countries here, and both countries have to be very careful in the next few weeks how they portray this and how they talk about this to their own peoples and to each other.
Right, and this is a very delicate time anyway, isn't it? Because next month the Palestinians are expected to declare statehood at the United Nations.
Yes, I mean, we've had all sorts of things that we could talk about for a very long time here, but Middle East, as in the Israeli-Palestinian problem, is clearly totally sort of deadlocked. And the Palestinians are seeking their way out by seeking this statehood recognition at the United Nations, something that the United States has argued very strongly against. But going back to what Dave was saying, I think it is very important, and it was quite interesting today because I thought we might see quite a sort of strong eruption of rhetoric from both sides, and we didn't, because I think they're still trying to sort out what happened and exactly how to calibrate this. We've had Israel and Egypt, which under Mubarak was sort of quite well aligned with Israel, as you say, through the United States. Popular sentiment in Egypt never that much behind that kind of relationship with Israel. Sinai, the obvious place where that can be seen, where perhaps security is even less good than it was. We ran a story, I think, about 6 days ago about the new smuggling of cars from Libya via Egypt and into Gaza through the tunnels. And this is the kind of thing that you've seen much more of. It's hard to imagine there haven't been more weapons going through the tunnels.
Might we
as
see
well.
Israel launch its own offensive in the Sinai province?
Oh, I hope not.
I think that would be a really, really explosive step.
Yeah.
Might-
I think if you want
is
to
that a
turn the
possibility?
Arab Spring
Particularly-
radical, then you have an Israeli invasion of somewhere Arab.
But then the other thing is that, I mean, they may not be policing it well because they have other concerns back in Cairo, but there's no indication that the Egyptian authorities now are any less committed to the idea of securing that border. So, I mean, you know, there would be absolutely no point, really, in that sense, for Israel to sort of go against people who are actually trying to do the work that Israel
they
wants them
want,
to do.
yeah.
But I mean, I think the whole point is that this incident has just sort of highlighted the sort of delicate situation of Israel in the middle of this, you know, Arab upheaval. I mean, that's Egypt over there where the transition is, I mean, not perfect, but somewhat orderly. But I mean, obviously, the prospect of real disorder in Syria, where this kind of event could happen over other dangerous
I
and
mean,
more
it was,
sort
it
of
was the defense minister in Israel who said who accused Egypt of losing control over this region. If the Israelis can't trust the new Egyptian regime to
they're not
maintain
gonna
security,
they're
then might
not-
they take?
But they're not going to get
matters into
greater
their
They're
own
not going to get
results
greater
from-
results by invading. You know, in other words, the other people on the other side have expressed the support of Israel's goals in that region. So if they, you know, they can say they're not doing a very good job of it, but to sort of go in with a foreign army, I think would be.
I think the key to this is the fact that it shows once again that all efforts to get Middle East peace back on track have come to nothing, and the growing frustration within the Gaza Strip that nothing's moving, and the intransigence by the leaders in Israel to do anything to get this going, plus the incapacity of the Americans to come up with any possible solution or try to find a way out of this, has just pushed this even more to the edge. Just a month before we're going to see, or probably the Palestinians try to declare their own country because they are fed up with the fact this isn't going anywhere. And I think that before we even get involved in any idea of some kind of clash between Israel and Egypt, I think the Israelis need to really clean up in front of their own front door, as they say in French, because they have got to make an effort to get the peace process back on track. And if anybody, I've been to the Gaza Strip many times, I've been to the West Bank many times, and I know the region very well. And if anybody goes for a walk in the Gaza Strip, they will understand why the situation there is so explosive, because the people who live there say, we've got nothing to lose. We live in an open-air prison. There's no possibility of us to get out. There's no possibility for the moment of any peace process coming along, or of us being able to go to the West Bank to see our family, or go into Egypt, if you like, to have a bit of fresh air. We're stuck in here. So what are we going to do? We're going to fight to get out. So we're going to fire missiles into Israel, and that's the reason why we saw this attack, in my view, yesterday in Eilat.
And
Also
also,
remember,
we're seeing the
Eilat is
emergence
also
of
a key Israeli seaside resort.
Yeah.
Where many tourists go, so that was an ideal target. For
And we're
these kind of
seeing
groups.
it's very worrying, isn't it? Because we're seeing the emergence of extremist groups who consider Hamas to be too moderate.
That's true, but also that is another unfortunate fallout from the incapacity of this peace process to get back on track, and the split within the Palestinian leadership from Hamas running the Gaza Strip on one side and Fatah running the West Bank on the other. And within the Gaza Strip, where, as I said, there's no vision or scope or hope of any kind of peace process coming along to alleviate the situation there for these people who are living in this open-air prison. They think, well, okay, we voted for Hamas to come in. What have Hamas done? Well, they haven't done anything. And in fact, there's even been corruption here. So we want somebody who's going to be more hard, who's going to fight for us, because we think violence is the only way out of that, which, of course, is not the way out. But while there's no firm decision made by Netanyahu, who I don't really think is that interested in the peace process. All he's really interested in is expanding the building of Israeli housing into the West Bank to try to make it impossible to create a Palestinian homeland afterwards, and not really move forward on the peace process. And why the United States won't make any firm move towards that, then the situation is going to remain in a stalemate.
All right. Well, we're going to have to leave that subject there because our last subject of the evening is another choppy week on on the global stock markets. As you can see from this graphic we've got for you here, markets taking a tumble again over the last 5 days. There we go, billions and billions disappearing off the value of companies around the world. Well, it all began with the leaders of France and Germany pledging to restore confidence in the Eurozone. Nicolas Sarkozy and Angela Merkel saying they want true economic governance. Markets, though, weren't reassured by those comments. Thursday was Europe's biggest one-day sell-off in years. It seems investors wanted a lot more than they got from Merkel and Sarkozy this week.
Well, I mean, I think it's Merkel and Sarkozy, but I think it's a little bit unfair to just pin it on them. And what we've been seeing over the past few weeks is a steady erosion in the value of stocks and shares around the world. And there's clear speculation, as you said in the headlines, that global economists are now warning of the ever greater danger of a fresh global recession. The so-called double dip recession that the United States economists fear. We've seen political leaders in Washington and in Europe seemingly unable to get ahead of market sentiment on all of this. So what I think we've seen is a fresh eruption of doubt. And we'll probably see more such eruptions. I mean, markets go up, markets go down, but if you look at the trend over the last month, there's been a colossal erosion of value. I think it's very unlikely that this is going to stop anytime really soon.
And governments are in a very difficult position, aren't they, Celestine? Because they've got to reduce these huge debt mountains, but at the same time, they've got to stimulate some kind of growth. And those two things just don't seem to work together.
Well, that, and they also have to keep their own electorates in mind. You know, I mean, it's a sort of a three moving circles. And indeed, I mean, I think, the whole debate between austerity versus growth, who was right. I think the United States, Obama started with a stimulus package, which many people thought was too little, and then got swept off into this debate about the debt and the sort of bringing it down, and a political battle ensued. And, that answer, which was to sort of pump up the economy and get us over the next sort of hump, seems to have gotten lost in the shuffle. And I think that's where the sort of lack of leadership all around gets the blame, and not just Sarkozy and Merkel.
It's dithering. There's been a lot of criticism about European leaders, in fact world leaders, not doing enough, just dithering and not really knowing what to do and not showing any leadership. So the markets have been doing whatever they want.
About a year ago, I thought this was going to be an interesting experiment for historians to look back on in about 20 years' time, when hopefully things have recovered. That some countries were going for massive austerity and some countries were going for massive stimulus, and I thought, well, let's see what works. But now it turns out that they're not. You can't have the two things running simultaneously, because it's a world economy, and because they're all being looked at by the same ratings agencies, and the same markets are following the health of their banks. So you can't separate the two things and see which one works, because they're if they have austerity measures in the Mediterranean, who's going to buy German cars? I was also interested by your phrase when you introduced this, saying that tens of billions wiped off the value would disappeared. But if it had gone up 4%, no one had said tens of billions appeared out of nowhere.
Yeah, no.
It's the nature of markets.
Stocks go up and down.
Yes.
But they are going down a lot more than they're going up this month.
They are going down a lot more than going up, and there seems to be something real going on in Paris and in other European capitals about the value of banks. There seems to be a genuine concern, and I think people underestimated the importance of what Trichet said 2 weeks ago now, when he said, look, we've got loads of money staying on hand at the ECB in case any banks need bailing out. And people didn't realise then that when he said that, I think, that he was expecting to have to do it. And now this week's report in the Wall Street Journal that the Americans Fed is worried that the subsidiaries of European banks in the States are going to start repatriating money from the States to try and keep their coffers full here in Europe, and so they're warning their people over there to beware of that. There seems to be a problem with the European banks, and I think it's probably the problem we talk about for months. They're exposed to the debts of countries that simply can't repay them.
I think also that one of the big problems that particularly the French are facing at the moment is that I think European leaders know how to get out of the crisis. The problem is no one wants to stick their neck out and say, okay, we're going to have to bring in a lot of very tough measures, including a rise in the VAT rate, when we're just a few months ahead of an election.
Well, that's what I mean about the electorate. I mean,
And so in France, they come out with these little measures which they say, well, we'll do this, we'll try and clamp down on people who get more tax bonuses from their jobs or from doing this and that. And that'll bring in a bit of money.
We'll stop
and
the
then,
speculation.
we'll stop this and we'll stop that, but it's not going to be enough to bring in the 10 billion euros that they need to get the French economy back on track. And until the elections take place next year in May, which is still a long way off, no one's going to stick their neck out and say, well, if I get elected, I'm going to put this up and I'm going to cut...
they know what to do, but they just...
Well, it seemed like
unemployment
investors
benefit and all
wanted
sorts of
two
things.
things, didn't they? They wanted euro bonds and they wanted
Well,
a bigger
Eurobonds
stability
are
fund.
a good idea, but not everyone's going to agree to that, because that means that some countries are going to have their own say about how
German
they run their
voters won't
finances
agree to
withdrawn.
that.
And
It's a good idea if you want to keep the euro.
and
Yes.
that is also,
And no one's
but
made the
you know,
political
we're a
choice yet
step
to abandon
But I-
closer towards
absolutely not,
a
but-
federal policy, a federal financial policy, fiscal policy in Europe, but we still haven't got the full way. And one of the errors, of course, when the euro was created was that it was a unique money, a single currency, but it wasn't for a single market. It was
But
for
I
everyone
think
controlling it
everybody
differently.
could see that at the time. What they
But no one
perhaps
thought we'd
didn't
get this
envisage was
far.
no. I mean, you never envisage the next crisis till you're in it. It seems to me, and I think everybody can see quite clearly that this does end in some form of closer European economic governance, as indeed Merkel and Sarkozy said on Tuesday. What they're doing at the moment, though, is considered by the markets to be too narrow, and by many other analysts to be too self-serving and taking in mind
Right.
voters'
But
interests.
I mean, I think a sort of word of, I mean, we should have some sympathy for these politicians.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, they're being asked by the markets to do something their publics are actually not very happy with, don't want to do, in a context of a European Union, which is constantly being accused of a democratic deficit. I mean, you know, there's a sort of a great disconnect between the elites and the people as to what this whole project is all about, what it's delivering, and for whom, and when, and so on. And you know, that's democracy. I mean, the people are sort of not out there going, "Give us our euro bonds." You know, I mean, they're just not.
Well, I think
And
most
it'll
people
take
like the euro still. I think
they like the euro, but the euro bond is, for instance,
But
Well,
do you think
an
the
enormous
Euro
sort of thing.
project is in real danger? Might we see the end of the Euro in the next couple of years?
No,
I really
definitely
don't
not.
think so.
No.
No.
Somebody
much
said
at
to me the
stake.
other day, I heard this, which I think sums up the situation quite well. The euro is like an omelette. It's easy to break the eggs to create the euro, but to actually put the euro back in to make the eggs is virtually impossible. And that's a bit how it is, because if people want to come out of the euro, it's going to cause so much trouble for the country that pulls out that it's just not economically viable. So that's the reason everyone's got to sort of come together to try to help each other stay within the eurozone.
And
But
I
they have
think-
to convince their publics that this is, you know, that this is in their interests. I mean, I just think they can't, you know, they can't afford to make these decisions over their heads.
Well, how about this? If the German public don't want to support the euro bonds, kick Germany out of the euro rather than one of the weaker economies, and then we'll just devalue 20-25%, and then see how their exports
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
On that point, on that bit of advice for the European Commission, we're going to leave it there. David Clark, Alison Smale, Celestine Bolin and Philippe Tell, many thanks indeed to you all. And thanks to you for watching. François Picard back with you on Monday with the debate. So do tune in for that and have a nice weekend. Thanks for watching.